Get ready to embrace debate. First Take starts now.
Good morning to all of you. Welcome into First Take. The original crew, Carrie, Skip, and Stephen A., they are making their way over to Las Vegas for some sort of fight going on this weekend. I don't know much about it. So we've got a fun crew here today. I'm from Mayweather-Pacquiao alongside Jorge Sedano, Scoop Jackson, and Kate Fagan. A whole lot of funness here at this table. So coming up today, the violence and rioting continues in Baltimore. The Orioles were forced to cancel their game last night against the White Sox. We're going to talk about that. Tonight, it is Game 5 between the Spurs and Clippers. Are the Clippers done if they lose? We'll also discuss that. But first, let's begin in the NBA. Last night, the Cleveland Cavaliers got some bad news about a couple of their players. Regarding Kevin Love, the power forward will miss at least the entire next series with a dislocated left shoulder. And then their guard, J.R. Smith, will miss the next 2 games after he was hit with a 2-game suspension for hitting Jay Crowder. So, guys, what does this mean for the East? George?
Well, I'll tackle it first in the next round, whether it's Milwaukee or Chicago, and I think we all probably think it's going to be Chicago. I don't think it's going to make a big difference, and I'll tell you why. Because LeBron is the most devastating player when he plays the 4 position. We've seen that the last 3 seasons when he was in Miami. Now, he doesn't like playing down there because he doesn't want to get the bumps and the bruises, and I understand that. It's easier to play from the perimeter. But it's hard to argue with the results they had there the last couple of years. His efficiency numbers were through the roof, the best of his career. So I think when you look at him, you put him at the 4, and who can match up with him? The big men, he can face them up. The smaller guys, let's say they put a 3 on him, he can back them down, and he creates so many other opportunities for everyone else on the floor. And they're going to add guys. I know JR is going to be missing for a while too,
right,
but they'll have James Jones out there. They'll have Mike Miller out there. They'll have some sharpshooters, some guys with some playoff experience out there. And I don't think the next opponent is going to be the problem. To me, potentially in the Eastern Conference Finals, maybe there's an issue because Atlanta's given them some trouble with their entire complement of players this season thus far. But in the next round, I don't think there's any question. I think LeBron is too good. He's the best player on the planet. And especially at the 4, he's devastating.
So it almost sounds
no
as
issue.
though you have more confidence in the Hawks versus the Bulls and...
I do.
Okay.
I do, based on Mike Budenholzer, his familiarity playing against LeBron after being on San Antonio's bench for a while. They've given LeBron all sorts of troubles. I do think the only problem with Atlanta is injuries. What's Millsap going to look like? They lost Cabo Cephalosha, which I think is going to be big for them because you need more than one guy to defend LeBron, and DeMarre Carroll will get the initial assignment, but you want more than one guy to make him work.
Mike's
never going to limit
him.
him.
Looks at him though. So.
Yeah, I mean, Tabo at least has some familiarity regarding LeBron. So I think Cleveland is still the favorite to win the East, but I would say that if I'm picking one team to maybe derail them, it would be Atlanta, not Chicago or Milwaukee.
All right. Kate, what do you think?
No, I think this is a bigger deal. I think the next round, let's say, right, we're all going to speak as if Chicago gets through. I think this is a big deal because of the way Kevin Love spreads the floor for this team. I mean, LeBron's played before without one of the quote-unquote big 3 in Miami when Bosh was hurt during the 2012 playoffs, but Chris Bosh being out is not the same thing as Kevin Love being out in this series because Chris Bosh, although towards the end of his career or of his time with the big 3 at Miami, he was spreading the floor more and pulling defenses out. He didn't do it the way Kevin Love does it. And so when you talk about who's going to fill in for Kevin Love, and if they bring in sharpshooters, sure, they have a couple guys, but there are guys who have big men covering them who are going to be pulled out of the lane. And I think that's going to be huge for this team against Chicago. I think absolutely they're in whether it's going to limit Kyrie's penetration, whether it's going to limit LeBron's ability to get to the basket. Sure, he's going to play the 4, but I think we saw Kevin Love during the regular season. At times, he wasn't even on the court in the 4th quarter. And a lot of people were saying, well, is this team better without him? We certainly saw during that first round of the playoffs how important he was to them. And the key factor there for me is his ability to spread the court.
And by the way, he could possibly miss more.
Yeah, it could be 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah.
Right. It's at least it's a minimum of the next series.
Right. And I think the same thing, but I also think that, Kevin was becoming an integral part of what Cleveland was doing in the playoffs, at least in the first couple of games, was showing how they could fit him in and what he could do. My bigger problem is is the missing of J.R. Smith. And, you know, and I go back to a couple of years ago when he was with the Knicks, and it was the same situation. We threw an elbow. If you really go back to that, the Knicks weren't the same after that, and J.R. Smith wasn't the same after that.
Yeah, I saw the numbers. I think he shot like 28, 29% after that.
He went ghost after that. Even the season after that, he went ghost. It's almost like, because they gave him the Sixth Man of the Year award that week.
Correct.
And then he threw the elbow at Jason Terry, and then he was out, and he was never the same. They got taken out by Indiana after that. He had a horrible series against them. My bigger concern is not necessarily Mr. Kevin Love, is the same thing going to happen to J.R. Smith again, where now that he's been gone, is he going to come back? And I know physically he'll be back, but will he be the same J.R. Smith that they caught by surprise, that was an extra offensive weapon that they did have? Or is he going to revert back to being the J.R. Smith that he has tended to be showing in the past, where he doesn't show up in games and now Cleveland's going to need him more than they need Kevin Love? So looking at the Eastern Conference, and I'm not sure, he's very confident Atlanta's going to get through this situation. And, you know, they probably will with Brooklyn, but Washington is a whole other beast for me, and I think that's going to be a challenge for Atlanta. My thing is that they're going to hurt not having Kevin Love because of what his offense, but my big concern is what J.R. Smith is going to be. If he doesn't show up, then I think they'll have a problem.
That's fair, but what I would say is, in the way I look at Chicago, they're not the defensive team that they were. Their defensive efficiency this year was down to 11. They're not the Tom Thibodeau teams that were in the top 5 defensively the last couple of years.
And
so
we saw some of that last week.
Right, so I don't see them. And their offense, even though it's much improved this year, they've got more weapons than they've ever had. I still don't think the way they play offense will rattle Cleveland defensively, even though Cleveland is not necessarily a very good team on defense. Even after the trades, they're only 14th in the league in defensive efficiency. Right. So I think that you add all that into the mix, and how good LeBron is when he plays the 4. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was shooting close to 60% from the field when he was playing in that pace and space offense in Miami, where he was the power forward. He's shooting, what, 40, high 40s now? You're 47, 48%. That's a big difference.
And he has a much better point guard than he did. No disrespect, but a much better point guard. So he can play the
Mario Chalmers is going to get mad at you, though.
He might get mad at you, but if he gets mad by me saying Kyrie Irving's a better point guard, then he got problems.
Mario Chalmers thought it was a big 4, not a big 3.
Right. Well, let Mario think that. We're all saying that LeBron, I think, playing the 4 will be much more different than it will be playing the 4 in Miami, because he has a point guard that probably allows him to play that position better. But let's all be honest. Kevin Love is probably averaging, maybe 18, 19 points a game. J.R. Smith averaging 16 points a game. I don't care who you are. You lose almost 40 points of offense.
It's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt if you're playing Miami, Washington, or the Bulls. So let's not lie to ourselves. They can be affected by this, and there's only so much LeBron can do.
And we're talking so much about whether the Bulls are going to be able to defend the Cavaliers. What about the Cavaliers defending the Bulls here? Everybody's talking about how, all right, LeBron's going to lock down Jimmy Butler. LeBron's not the same defensive player that he was in the past. He doesn't have the type of energy to lock down Jimmy Butler maybe he might have 5-6 years ago. He can't focus on defense the way he used to and still be able to be that guy on offense that the Cavs are going to need him to be. So I'm a little more worried about the Chicago Bulls, and if I was the Cavs, I'd be way more worried about the Chicago Bulls, assuming to be the
playoffs. Wisconsin's going to be really mad at all of us here. That's for sure.
I mean, the NBA playoffs is all about motivation, leadership, and also chemistry and staying healthy. And when you don't have that depth, it's going to affect any team.
But George's a big fan of matchups, and that's what I think. Right? He's a big fan of matchups.
I think matchups matter, and I think that's what you're seeing in this Brooklyn series with Atlanta. We'll get to that later, but I think that's an issue. And look, I do think, getting back to your point about Kevin Love and Chris Bosh earlier, and look, I think there's a correlation there, but I would say that Bosh was actually, offensively, Kevin Love is a better player, potentially, but defensively, what Bosh brought to the table, Bosh was arguably the best pick-and-roll defender in the league when he was playing with Miami, where Cleveland doesn't have that. So that would aid your point, actually, where that could be an issue for Cleveland, but I just still don't think that. I think that LeBron is enough to get them over the hump against a Chicago team that really hasn't shown me anything in this series.
See, I see the way he thinks about Atlanta's a matchup problem. I think Milwaukee's just a matchup problem for Chicago. So it's the same thing.
It's the same, right? Exactly.
So let's talk about Kevin Love, because he may have more motivation to be playing for, because he has a player option next season, which means he could opt out and leave Cleveland if he sees a better opportunity. So considering that, guys, because he should he be trying to come back sooner because of that factor, Kate?
Well, the reason he went to Cleveland, one big reason, was to be a guy who makes winning plays on a winning team. I mean, that was the thing here. So take the money into account, for sure. But I think what was interesting to me about this happening in Boston was we were looking at Boston and L.A., we being the sports media world, and fans looking at Boston and L.A. as two destinations. Now, he leaves the Boston Garden the other night, having some bad blood with that Celtics team. And I can't see him now. Of course, time will pass over the next few months if he decides not to opt into that contract, whether he's going to look at Boston as a place he wants to go back to after walking out of the Garden with those feelings. So that injury and the way it happened, in a way, could have helped the Cavaliers in their pursuit to get him back. But about getting back this postseason, I think absolutely he needs to, because he needs to prove that he can be that guy, that he's not just a number chaser, that he's not just a great player on a bad team, but that he can be the winning piece for a winning team. That's really important to him.
But at the same time, we have to look at the depth of this injury, and it's not just a separated shoulder as initially reported. He has a lot of other things going on. Now, he can do as much damage rushing himself back in a long-term situation where he's looking for a long-term contract later on by coming back too soon. So I think it's important for him to come in and show what he can do in a playoff situation. He's never been in this before. He has right now, a 3-game sample just to show the other teams what he can do in a playoff situation. I can understand his angst to try to get back to show that, hey, you know what? I could be that missing piece in a playoff situation. But if I come back too soon and do this situation, do I run into a Kevin Durant problem or a Yao Ming problem with my shoulder that they did with their feet, where it's ongoing? A team's going to sign up if I get hurt again.
Exactly.
You could do yourself damage. So I understand him wanting to rush back to prove himself, but there is a comfort zone by having a player option. Now, it's been the season of hell for Kevin Love. We can all agree with that. It's been the season of hell. But he does have a comfort zone in not having to opt out right now and using next season fully healthy to prove himself for what he can do.
Yeah, I think, look, from a business standpoint, I think it makes sense what you're saying, but I'm with Kate on this one. I think that we haven't put the pressure on this team like we did those Miami teams when they got together because of the feel-good story of LeBron coming back to Cleveland. But at the end of the day, that team was built to win a championship.
Right.
And for them to win a championship, even though I didn't think they need Kevin Love for the next round, they're going to need Kevin Love to win a championship. And so with that said, he's got to prove it to people, whether it's this year or next year, whether he opts out or he becomes a free agent in 16. If he doesn't come back, there's going to be GMs around the league, and we all know that. You guys covered that league too. You know that those GMs are like, but is he tough enough? Does he have the intangibles that I need to be the championship player?
But then the consequence of it is that you can't, as we all know as athletes, you can't control your body. If he does come back sooner and he ends up re-injuring himself, then he completely puts himself in a miserable situation.
No, I get that, but here's the thing. And I'll ask you guys the question. If he comes back, can he come back in a limited role, even though we know he's going to be hurt? Can he give you 15, 20 minutes, and is that enough to tell the naysayers, hey, look, you see, he's tougher than we think he is?
We're not talking about him coming back and being unable to play at all.
Right.
We're talking about that line where it's like, if you pushed it, you played through some pain.
Right.
You are putting yourself at risk, but you can play somewhat effectively versus just he can't play for an entire month. I'm talking about that gray area there. That's where I think he needs to push the envelope here. In addition, because throughout this year, we've been talking about how he's not getting along with the Cavs and they didn't embrace him.
Pictures.
You saw in that Boston game, in a way, his team had his back. After he left the floor, they seem to be turning a corner, and so you'd want to see him get back for them and to continue that momentum, as well as what he needs to prove in terms of himself as a playoff player.
The good thing that is working out for them and Kevin Love is that this Bulls and Bucks series is going further and further along, so that gives them more time to rest.
Well, here's the thing. The rest is one thing, and I think you can go into a player option decision-making off-season with an injury, but you can't go into that as damaged goods, and that's the difference. Is Kevin Love does he risk going back and damaged good if he comes back too soon?
But the shoulder injury, I mean, is it something that at least I haven't heard that it's something that he's not going to be able to recuperate, and it's going to be a long-term disabling type situation?
But they still don't know if he has to have labrum surgery. They still don't know.
Well, the guys have come back from labrum surgery pretty
But what I'm saying, if you come back too soon.
Okay, well, we've seen guys come back, though. What I'm saying is this isn't going to affect the long-term status of Kevin Love.
I think if you have a contract coming up, and you have a reoccurring injury that's not healed, I think it's going to affect you. I really, at least from a GM standpoint.
But you're going to get surgery in the offseason,
But wouldn't they look at his body of work? For example, he's played the entire regular season. Wouldn't they consider that his body of work rather than just what he does over the next 5 to 10 games?
But that's going to be the rest because you're as good as what you were the last time somebody saw you. In the GM standpoint, his body of work in Minnesota now doesn't mean anything because Minnesota was never in the conversation for a championship. Your body of work is now playing with LeBron James, playing with Kyrie Irving, playing with a team you're supposed to build on, and you had the worst season of your career, basically, until you got to the starting lineup of Minnesota. That's the body of work they're looking at. So I understand Kevin Love, like, man, I don't want to leave that on the table for GMs to look at. But you also don't want to put yourself in a situation where you come back too soon. I hate to keep bringing up like a Kevin Durant where you're rushing back and now it becomes a problem.
Yeah, but I think
Grant Hill where you're rushing back.
I'm not a doctor, but I think feet and shoulders are a totally different scenario, especially in that sport.
I got you. But, you know, at the same time, the rebounding aspect, everything you do, any injury can be ongoing, especially with an injury that's not as simple as this one. And from the diagnosis we've been given early is that this isn't just a simple separation of the shoulder. There are other things going on here that may take time, and until we get that answer, I don't think he should have in his mind, I need to rush back, because you don't want to go into a situation where you're putting yourself out there for teams to opt for you as damaged goods.
You don't think he's going to be the scapegoat, though? You don't think he becomes the scapegoat if he doesn't come back?
I think absolutely.
Yeah.
Because he already has that tag on him.
Right.
And now it just propagates that even further. So, of course, he doesn't want to come back to risk his future health. But he needs to come back in terms of proving himself and the type of player that I think he thinks he is and wants to be. And like you said earlier, these GMs, they notice that stuff. This is a guy who came back and played for his team and contributed in whatever way he could versus we're not sure,
Kate,
if he's hustling back.
Kate, you mentioned the Bosch injury in 2012. That's an abdominal injury. That's worse. That's worse than this. And he came back, I think, to game 3 or 4 of the next series against Boston.
But there's still, I mean, certain injuries, there's certain things you can do. You can play on certain injuries you just can't play on and play with, especially if you don't have a diagnosis. But you got to understand, I'm dealing with this and we don't know exactly what's wrong. They haven't put a finite answer to, okay, this is what's wrong, this is what we're going to do. They're still playing this out. Once again, they still don't know if he has to have surgery.
But we're
there's
talking
a
about
difference between coming back when you're risking your future versus coming back.
I know, but coming back when you're risking your future, when you're talking about a contract situation, and we're talking about him opting out as a player option.
What we're talking about is him coming back when maybe he's not going to be as
100%, but he'll be 75%, 80%. Right.
And some guys won't come back at all because they don't want to play that way. They don't want to look. They don't want their game to look like that. Well, I'm talking about him sacrificing how his game might look, how his minutes might look, not damaging himself for the future.
Okay, but let's do this as a worst case scenario. Let's say after the season he does come back, okay, and he actually re-injures it. What does that do for his player option then?
He can just opt in. He can just opt in.
That $16 million sitting on the table.
That's but his opting out is gone, and the season from hell, and the team may not want to.
But that's not the worst case scenario. He can still be a free agent at 16.
But my thing is that his decision we're talking about him possibly opting out of this. Yeah. To me, if he re-injures himself, he eliminates the opt-out.
Right, but he's got the something to fall back on. Like he's got the $16 million. And he can be a free agent in 16 again.
And how many opportunities has he had to this point to be in a contention?
Right.
And of course you could say, all right, well, he opted in, you have that next year too, but you don't know. You don't know what might happen next year.
My thing is
and again, we're only talking about if he's not risking further injury.
Right. My thing is just have that decision right now. Just opt in.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Welcome back, Grim, George, Kate, and Scoop here with you. Let's stay in the NBA. Derrick Rose and the Chicago Bulls lost again to the Milwaukee Bucks. Last night it was 94-88. D. Rose had 13 points and 6 of the team's 13 turnovers. Their 3-0 series lead is now down to a 3-2 series lead. So, guys, how much confidence do you have in this Bulls team now? I'm going to go to you first, since you're the Chicago guy.
Right. Confidence, a lot. Faith.
I want that distinction.
Right. Hey, I'm Bill Clinton. I'm really specific with words. No, but I do have confidence in them because I do think they'll get it together and play much better in Game 6 than they did in Games 4 and 5. But I don't want to take anything away from what Milwaukee's doing. I think this is a matchup nightmare for them. I think Jason Kidd has shown that he is one of the true new coaching geniuses in the league, and now you have to take them seriously. But the Bulls all year long have been consistently inconsistent. So if you watch them all year long, this is almost the norm for them. The thing you have on your side, or I have on my side being from Chicago, is that this is one of the first time we've seen them basically healthy. And the whole thing about them being healthy is that we expect automatically, you're healthy, You're going to be that team that's going to challenge for it. And it doesn't happen that way in sports. There's a lot of other factors that go into play. Continuity, finding consistency, finding rhythm. And not at the healthy, we expect the rhythm to happen automatically. But I just go back to what we've been doing all season. They have been consistently inconsistent. But when it's come time for them to overachieve, they usually overachieve.
And they've been that way, right, because of the injuries.
Yes.
Not because of something to do with their psyche or coach. It has specifically been because of all the setbacks they've had.
Yeah.
And in a counterintuitive way, I'm actually more... not impressed with them, but I actually have more faith in them because they're going through this right now.
Right.
Those first 2 games in the series where they were playing well and they were playing better than people thought. I was concerned because I was waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Right.
I figured they would there's no way that Derrick Rose was going to be able to have just come back and have only a few weeks and all of a sudden they're just going to be off and running. I never thought that.
Right.
So I'm actually pleased a little bit to see that they're struggling because that's who this team needs to be before they can get to the other side.
So you're more impressed with them because they've lost 3
No,
straight?
no. I have more faith that possibly they're working through something.
Right.
Right. There's challenges they have to work through.
Exactly, and they're struggling right now, and I think they're going to work through it. And the only way for them to get to the other side and be the Bulls team that we've seen at various points is if they work through those issues. And they're doing that these 2 games. And like Zach Lowe on Grantland had a great piece about the versatility possibilities that this team possesses. The options that they have that few other teams have. And so you can look forward and be like, if they can work through these wrinkles, if Derrick Rose can find some kind of balance, if Jimmy Butler is playing well, we got Gasol, you can name it all. They have options that no other team has. So that they're struggling now against a team that I think they can beat gives me hope that they work through some of these issues and that when they face the Cavs, they have it more together.
Right, certainly. That's what you want. If you're going to find the time to struggle, the first round is the time to struggle a little bit because you know you have a talent advantage over this Milwaukee team. It's their first time for most of them in these playoffs. But here's the thing. And I'm going to do that thing where you double down. Like yesterday on my radio show, I got asked the question about the second round. I said, yeah, the Bulls, they're foregone conclusion they'll be there. So I got all Wisconsin mad at me last night. And then, of course, Milwaukee goes on to win the game. So now I've been hearing from those folks, those fine folks in Wisconsin about this. So I'm going to double down. The reality is this. No team in the history of this league has come down 0-3. And no offense, Milwaukee Bucks aren't the team that are going to do that. Okay, they're not going to be the team that's going to pull that off.
They're not the Red Sox.
Right, they're not the Red Sox. They're the Milwaukee Bucks. They're a nice young team. They're on the rise. They're ascending. But the Bulls are a more talented team, even though they're dealing with the injury issues, and they're real. Not only Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah has not been the same guy all season, and may not be ever again. Right. He doesn't look the same defensively. I mean, he may have been arguably the best defensive center in the NBA last season. And I don't think he's that right now.
Right.
And just as a collective, they're not as good on defense. But I do agree with Kate and I do agree with Scoop that at some point all this will probably come together. Now, will it manifest itself in time to beat the Cavs? Yeah, I don't know. I think that may not be able to transpire. But in this particular series, I don't have any worries.
Here's the thing, though. The Bucks are getting better with each game. And the next game is also at Milwaukee, at one of the best defensive teams in the league during the regular season. So what's going on right now? What's causing the trouble?
But I don't believe in that momentum stuff from game to game. Like, I believe in momentum within the game, but not game to game.
There's one thing that I have to say about the Chicago Bulls, and I wrote about it for us. They do have a tendency, and I don't want to say to get big-headed, but get comfortable after big wins. They don't handle early success. They had a game during the regular season against the Houston Rockets where they beat them, I want to say about 20 or something like that. And then they went on like a skid where they just lost. And they tend to get like, all right, we're here.
Right.
And it hits them psychologically and they can't get out of that tailspin for a while. You have to get out of it a lot quicker during the playoffs. But I've seen them come out of that. So, that's where my confidence is. Like, look, I've seen them get like, all right, we're the Bulls again. This is what we're supposed to do. And then reality hits them and teams aren't afraid of them. Yeah. And I think in this situation, that's why I think in Game 6, they'll come out of that tailspin and get together. Now, moving forward, I don't know.
When teams aren't playing well, usually, you can point to one of two things. One, they need to switch what they're doing and their strategy, or they're just not playing hard enough.
Right.
I would much rather it be the latter. And I think that's what the issue with this Bulls team was the last game, was not playing hard enough. It's like when you're a shooter and you miss a shot, you want it to be either short or long. You don't want to be all over the place. Like it's short or long, you can just adjust a little bit. Your fundamentals aren't off. Your mechanics aren't off. With this Bulls team, I don't see a problem with what they're doing. I don't think they need to tweak anything. They just need to get out of that mindset that you just said that they fall into.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed last night, their sense of urgency and their effort and their energy just seemed a little down, and the arena was completely quiet last night.
To start off the game, they went
Yeah.
down 9-0 and didn't score until like 5 minutes into the first quarter. You can't come into a closeout game with that attitude because you give the other team crazy confidence.
Let me ask you a question. I think schematics plays a factor here. And Pau Gasol has obviously been a really important piece for them this year on offense. But defensively, he's not the guy that he once was. If you're Tibbs, do you think about when Boozer was there, you used to switch out Boozer and bring in Taj Gibson, who's a much better defender and a much younger, sprier player against this particular Milwaukee team. Maybe that's a small adjustment that you have to make.
Well, and it's also adjustment that they have to make as far as learning how to, adjusting how they score in the paint. Powell does not have a lot of lift on his, so he's going to the basket. You have to find a way to shoot in the 5-foot range as opposed to the 1-foot range against Milwaukee because they close so well. You know, Joakim Noah missed a couple of layups yesterday, and against this team, you can't afford to get that because you're not going to get it. But Powell and Derek and Jimmy even went to the hole sometimes, and they thought they were open, and they're not. You have to release the ball a lot quicker now. So the adjustment they have to make is that Powell, no layups. Now you're doing, 5-foot teardrops. You have to do teardrops against it because they close so well. So Taj Gibson may be a good adjustment.
On defense, I'm not saying you bench Gasol. I'm just saying in certain instances you bring in Taj to defend against the Bulls because he's a younger, more sprier player, and he's a much better defender than Powell.
And he's much more. And to me, I think you use their length to their disadvantage. I have not seen Aaron Brooks and Derrick Rose in the backcourt at the same time to use their speed against that. That's something, Thibodeau might want to take advantage of in the 5-minute spurt. Look, let's outrun them. Let's get this going. So
Rose is going to yo-yo, and that's what we should have expected. He's had up and down games, and there's no other way around it.
Yeah. Well, the good thing for these guys is that they've got 3 days in between. The game at Milwaukee isn't until Thursday, so it'll allow them to reset psychologically. All right, so let's move over to the Western Conference. Tonight it is a very pivotal game, 5 at the Staples Center between the Spurs and Clippers. After suffering their worst loss in playoff history, the Clippers responded with a win on Sunday.
That's a
They sure did, didn't they? To even the series at 2 games apiece. So, you know what, guys? Many think the defending champion Spurs are the favorite in this one, but are the Clips done if they lose tonight? George?
I hate to deal in absolutes, so I'm going to start by that. And this is the worst possible first-round matchup San Antonio could have had.
The answer should have been, what is your definition of done? That's what you should have asked. What is your definition of done?
If the Clippers lose tonight, I don't think they're winning. I think they need to win Game 5 to win this series. I have much more faith in San Antonio because maybe it's the eye test. I've seen it before. I've seen them win a couple games in a row. I don't have that faith with the Clippers going down 3-2, going on the road to San Antonio to try to salvage that series. So I guess if we're going to have to do this in absolute, I'm going to say yes, they are done if they lose.
We like strong opinions.
Yeah. No, look, I get it. But all I'm saying is, again, this has played a pretty big factor. Tony Parker and his injury has hurt them because as good as Patty Mills is off the bench and as good as Corey Joseph is as a defensive player, none of them have the penetration skills that Tony Parker does. And he creates all sorts of havoc for his opponents when he's in there and he's healthy. So for the Clippers, this actually may be a godsend and a blessing for them because they may have a legitimate chance because Parker really is the guy that stirs the drink on offense.
The crazy thing, though, about his Achilles injury, he looked almost better in Game 4 and 3, I thought. He looked decently healthy.
Yeah, but he's not been that guy. Kawhi's been carrying the load, and you got to have Tony be able to balance that a little bit.
Yeah, and then Tim due for a big game, too, so Kawhi's been carrying them.
But he's old, man. He's up and down.
I know, but he's doing this
young 39 years old.
I'm saying
and it ain't a good matchup. He's got those 2 young guys, Blake and DeAndre, trying to out-jump him.
I'm saying he will have a big game. He's due for one. And Tim, he'll have 2 games off, and then he'll have a big 20-10 game when it comes time to show up. I think the biggest thing with the Clippers and having to answer your question is that I think Game 3 was more of the rule than the exception with them. And that's what bothers me. That's what bothers me is that the team that showed up in Game 3, getting beat like that bothers me that team can't show up again. That's why I think Game 5 is so important because even if they do not win Game 5, then mentally they can check out the same way they did in Game 3.
Yeah.
I've seen San Antonio get beat. I have not seen them check out. The problem I have with the Clippers is that there are times where I've seen them check out, and Game 3 is that time. And I'm not going to think that this may be the one time that happens in this particular series. So they have to grab Game 5 because, to me, if they go down, then there's no way for them to catch back up because I don't know if I hate to say this about them because I picked them. This is my second year in a row picking them to win the whole thing.
You picked them to win the whole thing?
Twice.
Oh,
so
you should have learned after the first year.
Well, you know,
you're doubling down is what you're doing. What I was just doing.
I gave them the Donald Sterling excuse last year. I gave them that. That happened in the middle of playoffs. Sure. I'm like, you know what? That's not going to happen again. I'll give you the excuse. I thought they would come back and do what the Warriors did this year. That's what I thought I was going to see in the Clippers this year, and I haven't seen it. So I say this with personal intent involved in this. I don't think they're mentally strong enough to get back if they go down 3-2.
We're obviously having this conversation because it's the Clippers. And that's the narrative about them and always has been. Even before Doc Rivers took over and they were under Vinny Del Negro, the narrative was that they couldn't get it done in the playoffs. And at the end of game scenarios, they couldn't get it done. But then we talked that way about them when they went down 2-1. We're like, oh, the Clippers are done because that's what the Clippers do. Then they won that game, which was very un-Clipper-like. Right. And they're doing some things that are un-Clipper-like. And I always hate to fall down the slope of, well, I don't think the Clippers can do it because I haven't seen them do it before.
Right.
And until we have a new Clipper model, we're always going to think, well, the Clippers are the same Clippers they were 3 years ago, and 2 years ago, and 1 year ago. Until if they do win this series, all of a sudden the Clippers have turned a corner. And you never know when that corner is going to come. But if you do look at what they're doing right now, especially with CP3 being in his 10th year in this league, time's getting away from him.
Yeah.
About being a contender and winning a championship. They do have the two best players in this series, the way they're performing right now. They're doing things a little differently than a Clippers team has ever done, right? Like during the regular season, they only 19 times had two reserves score in double figures. And they were 14-5, so they're a good team when they get contributions off the bench. And they did that in Game 4, right? They had Austin Rivers played well,
right,
to the surprise of everybody, and of course Jamal Crawford,
right,
who's always coming off the bench and giving them something. So they're doing things differently than the Clippers, quote-unquote, always have. And they have Doc Rivers, who end-of-game scenarios is really, really good, which I think at some point will give them a boost, possibly in this series, or if not, going forward.
I'm not giving the edge over Pop, though. That's where I would draw the line.
No, when the Clippers have a play at the end of
no,
games.
He's great at drawing up plays.
He's better than Vinny Del Negro.
Oh, absolutely.
Not better. We're not comparing him to Pop.
Right.
Him to predecessors.
Now, here's the other thing that I would tell you is, and before the series on the NBA Lockdown podcast, shameless plug, you can download it at ESPN.com/PodCenter.
We are all plugged on. We all plug all your
hey,
stuff.
ESPNW.com.
You go to 5:30 podcast.
There you go.
Hot takedowns.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people watching. Take
Right.
advantage. So here's the thing. We talked about it. Amin Al-Hassan and I were talking about it, and he made a good point, which was it's going to be a battle of attrition here in the sense that how long before the Clippers' lack of depth becomes a problem? Now, I know that you pointed out Jamal Crawford. He's exceptional. We know how good he is. He's a six-man-of-the-year guy. But we don't expect what we saw at Austin Rivers very much. I mean, we saw the one situation. I don't expect more of that, to be quite honest with you. So you look at the Spurs, even with the injuries, I still feel like they're the deeper team overall. And so it's about how long before the wheels fall off of those six guys that basically the Clippers trot out for heavy, heavy minutes. How long before the wheels fall off from those guys going up against a team that's far deeper?
Wasn't that the theme heading in, though, looking in the Western Conference, though? We knew that the Warriors were going to cruise their series, and the series that we wanted to watch was this one between the Spurs and the Clippers, and I think a lot of people, including myself, had the Spurs just because of their experience in the playoffs and also their depth. So
who has to test the wheels then? Who's going to win the test the wheels, and who feels they need to get this game more? San Antonio's not going to rest on their laurels and say we already got championship, we don't have anything to prove. The Clippers have. They got something to prove, and it has to happen in this game.
Over at the nation's capital, the Redskins made a decision about quarterback Robert Griffin III and decided to exercise their fifth-year option, which means RG3 will stay in Washington through the 2016 season. And don't forget that last season, Griffin, Kirk Cousins, and Colt McCoy all started at times throughout the season, and they still ended up with a 4-12 season. So since we're talking a little football, we decided to send Scoop out. He's getting coffee and a snack, and we've got Ryan Clark here with us. So we want to ask you guys today, should they have picked up RG3's option? Ryan?
I don't think the question is really should they have. It's like, now by doing it, did you make a mistake? And I don't think you did. It's only fully guaranteed if he's injured. So it's not like they're saying he's definitely going to be here through the 2016 season. They're just saying if you do play really well we like the option to negotiate a new contract with you, or at least know that you will be here through the next season. And I think it's smart on their part, because we're also talking about a guy who kind of plays head games with himself. You know, he came out with a slogan now, and he wants people to like him. He wants to feel wanted. He wants to feel loved. And I think by doing this is the Washington Redskins saying, hey, you know what, RG3, we're going to put some faith in you and say, you know what, we want you here through that season. Now, if he goes out and doesn't perform well, now you can sit him on the bench, or you can not bring him back for that year, and nothing's hurt. Nothing against the salary cap. You have not hurt your team in any way. So I think it's a good decision, both business-wise and also psyche-wise, for a quarterback like RG3.
Kate, what do you think?
Well, there's so much flexibility in the decision, which is hard to criticize it, because if they had locked into him for $60 million, then you have more of a debate about whether they should have done that. But two things. One, I think a little bit at play here is that the Redskins drafted him. So they kind of feel this responsibility towards him. I saw this when I covered the Sixers a lot. Guys that they drafted, at times they evaluated differently than guys they didn't draft, because trading him or moving him was an admission that perhaps that wasn't the best decision. I think there's some of that happening here, especially with Dan Snyder and RG3 sort of committing to him and keeping him around in a way maybe they wouldn't have if he had come to the Redskins in a different way. The second thing is it's a complicated issue. If he's healthy, they can cut him. If he's injured, it's guaranteed. It kind of opens up a lot of issues for Gruden here about, you know, what he's going to do, how quickly he has to monitor him. If he's not playing well,
you got to pull him.
You got to pull him.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's a dangerous situation in terms of locker room and how to manage all of that. It's not the easiest space for Gruden to be in and the Redskins to be in. It's not that guaranteed money if he's healthy. Hurt, all of that is a very interesting scenario for the Redskins to have to go into the season with.
Look, I agree with both of you. I don't think there's any doubt. But here's the other thing. You mentioned Gruden, and it puts him in a tough spot. And you can tell me if I'm talking out of turn, because you played on that team. But wasn't he brought in to be the guy to fix RG3? Isn't that part of the deal, too? Again, RG3 has put himself in this position for a lot of reasons. And you highlighted some of them. But he's the guy that was brought in to be the quarterback savior, the quarterback whisperer, and I haven't seen much of that either. And that's got to be on him to some extent, right? Like, we can't sit here and just say it's all on RG3. He has a major part in it. But this coach was brought in specifically because he said, hey, I can fix that guy. Look what I did with Andy Dalton, who was a second-round pick or whatever. I can make this guy the guy he was in year one when he was the best rookie in the NFL that season.
Well, I think when you make this decision, you're looking at that rookie season, because you're saying the skill set is there. Look, I practiced with him. I saw him at practice. When he knows where it's going, when he has confidence in the throw, he can sling it like anybody in the league. You know, the Tom Brady's and all these guys. But it's here. It's mentally. It's also him becoming a part of the offense. You know, not necessarily just learning it, not necessarily just being the quarterback, but being a part of it, not having to be the guy. You mentioned Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's not the guy.
Right.
And he wasn't the guy.
Right.
But they built enough around him that allowed the team to win. And through winning, Andy Dalton became a quarterback who got a $100 million contract. And I think that's the same thing you need to do with RG3. We had to learn throughout the year last year, just watching Gruden. There were early games where Alfred Morris rushed for under 70 yards like 3 games in a row. And then finally toward the end of the season, he got Alfred going and got him moving. So I think you go in with that game plan and let RG3 be a part of it, but not the whole offense. And I think he prospers that way, and that's how you get an opportunity to keep him around. And to your point, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I'm wondering, is he really their guy, though? You talked about what he was like in his rookie season, but that was pre-knee injury, post-knee injury. I mean, he's a completely different player, not to mention, it seems as though all the issues and the dynamics within the locker room, I don't even know if the players really respect him and look to him as a leader as well.
Well, here's the thing.
He's the owner's guy.
Here's the thing, though, I would like to clear up. This is the thing I'd like to clear up for all you guys.
Yeah.
You know, everybody doesn't get along.
Right.
Like, we don't all hang out. Yeah. You know, we have different lives. It's not like college where you kick it and you go back to the dorm. When you play NFL football, there's a guy like me. I had 3 kids. You know, so I would leave work and run the basketball practice and run the football practice and do these things. Other guys would leave work and go play Madden because they had no responsibilities. So we're not all friends. We don't all kick it. If RG3 plays well, he doesn't have to have a friend on the team. They will respect him and allow him to lead because of what he's doing on the field.
It's hard, though, because this feels like a placeholder move. And it feels like a plan because they don't have a plan. It's kind of like, well, they have no other quarterback right now. Of course they're going to take this option. But if what I'm hearing is that RG3 needs to feel wanted and supported and like he's the guy, but this move isn't about him being the guy, how do you think he handles that?
Well, yeah, you also have to think about it. Early in the offseason, what does Jay Gruden come out and say? RG3 is our starter. He wasn't prompted to say that. He didn't need to say that, but he said it. And I felt like there was reasoning behind it. You think about the season, and sometimes Gruden's in the news saying, well, RG didn't take the right drop, or he looked the wrong way. That's something I've really never heard a head coach say about a quarterback. And then so now RG3's having to answer those questions. So I think a lot of these moves are to kind of quiet those suspicions and what people think of, okay, there's some tension between those two. And, you know, you talk about making the move because a guy was drafted by a team. That is absolutely true. Because you try to be right. But I don't know if that's the same thing now that Scott McCloughan's in, because he's not his guy. You know, also, he's not necessarily Jay's guy, even though you say he's the quarterback whisperer. So RG has a lot to prove here, but I think this goes into somewhat saying, okay, we're going to give you that opportunity to prove it.
The common denominator was, and I mentioned it briefly, is the owner. He's the owner's guy.
No question.
And they gave up a ton. So they're going to do everything they can to justify everything that they gave up to keep him around.
But it'd be one thing if he had all year. And it was like, this is your year. You're the starting quarterback. We're working through this. We want to see if you can get back to your rookie year. But there's this weird stipulation that comes with it.
Right.
And that's odd because he can't just look at the whole year and be like, all right, I have this opportunity. There's so many weird caveats that come with it.
And we saw last season, he did not have the best season. He only had 7 starts, and the Redskins went 2-5 in those games. So what will the Redskins do from this day forward? The draft is just a couple days away, and they have the 5th overall pick. Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network reported that the Browns reached out to Washington about trading for the 5th pick. So if you guys were Washington, would you draft a QB or would you trade the pick? George?
If I were Washington and one of those quarterbacks fell to me, man, that's a tough spot. I think they have so many holes that I would probably trade the pick. That would be me. I just think they have more issues than just the quarterback there. They've got issues on defense. They've had issues on defense for a while. Alfred Morris is a nice running back, but they could use another back. They could use, some wide receiver help. They could use a lot of help. So I would probably trade the pick because the 5th pick would get you probably a couple first-rounders, maybe some future picks. And that, if you're Scott McCloughan, all of a sudden you can start rebuilding that team in your image.
Ryan, what would you do?
If Jameis falls, you take him.
Well, okay, but I don't think Jameis is falling.
How about if Marcus Mariota
I was
falls?
just talking.
This
is just.
So how about if Marcus Mariota?
What about Mariota?
You don't take him.
Right, you trade it.
You don't take him. You trade the pick. McCloughan alluded to it in his press conference, though. He was like, we want to turn these picks into 10 picks. So he's kind of putting the bait out there that, hey, guys, if you want to come get this pick, it's open.
Yeah.
You can come get it. And especially if they're thinking of going pass rusher, which is something they need. You can move down. There's Fowler, there's Ray, there's also Gregory. So there's guys you can get if you move back in the draft. If that spot is open and somebody wants to move up to get Mariota, if he's still available, I think you trade out of it and get as many picks as you can. Because remember, this team has been pick depleted ever since they got RG3.
And we know the Browns and Jets are thirsty.
They're thirsty.
They want to make a deal. They're antsy to make a deal.
They're looking at Mariota.
And since 2000, Washington has drafted 9 QBs. And if you look at
draft value, they've used the most draft value, draft capital of the top 5 NFL teams, and possibly if you factor in what they traded away for RG3, like the most. So they have used the most draft capital pretty much since 2000 in trying to find a QB. So would I advise them to just continue that cycle? No. In fact, as you were mentioning, they've done that thing where they traded for the now, they traded the future for the now. Mm-hmm. And you give away a lot of future when you want the now. So they need to flip that script, I think, now. They need to stockpile draft picks. They need to, some teams are going to want to come in and want that pick and give them a lot of value for it. So that's what I think that Redskins play needs to be. They can't keep chasing this QB life. 9 QBs. That's a really good stat. 9 QBs since 2000. That's a lot.
That's great. You know what ends up happening is that some franchises, and I feel like this is one of them, they try to appease the fans maybe too much, as opposed to just doing business the right way. And when you appease the fans, you chase. And that's what's ended up happening with them, is that they chased. They thought they'd get a quick fix because he looked so electrifying, and then things didn't work out. But it goes to show you that you have to be a little more calculated. The reason the Patriots are so good is not because Belichick is so great at the draft, but he realizes they're like lottery tickets. You got to get as many as you can so you can get a chance to win the lottery.
Sports Illustrated did a player comparison to the top 64 prospects. So here's a look at their top 7. The ones that stood out, they've got Jameis Winston. They compared him to Bears quarterback Jay Cutler. I thought that was very interesting, so we'll get your all takes on that. Marcus Mariota to Packers QB Aaron Rodgers. That's a nice compliment. West Virginia receiver Kevin White to Cardinals receiver Larry Fitzgerald. And you also have receiver Amari Cooper being compared to Packers wide receiver Jordy Nelson. So I want to ask you.
On that list.
There are a lot of Packers. It's a huge compliment. So let's have a little fun and do some comparisons. I'm curious about what you guys think about the Jameis Winston Cutler one.
I think it's a huge insult. I mean, I don't know. Like,
Wait, for who?
Well, for Jameis. Yeah, like, listen, I think Cutler's a good quarterback, but, I mean, he's been pretty maligned because he's not a guy that can, relate to teammates or whatnot, right? He's had issues in the locker room. Even a guy like Brandon Marshall, who was his guy, kind of ran him under the bus last season. I don't think that seems to be the issue with Jameis, at least not in college. He seemed to be one of the guys. Now, it's weird in the NFL, and Chris Mortensen said this the other day on SportsCenter, that in the NFL, you as a quarterback, you have to still be, you got to be one of the guys, but you still have to be the CEO, which is really a tough spot to be put in, especially as a young player. But look, Cutler is a very talented player. But I think that I just don't see the comparisons from a personality standpoint.
Scoop, what do you think?
Well, I can look at it exactly like George said, but I also think that they're making a comparison possibly. I'm not speaking for Sports Illustrated. But I think possibly they're looking at that thing where maybe he thinks he gets it and won't listen to anybody.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? That's the Jay Cutler thing. It's like, look, I know, you can't tell me, not that he's going to run coaches out of there, but you can't tell him anything. And I don't know if that's quote-unquote arrogance, but it's just that's that Jay Cutler thing. And maybe they're looking at Jameis Winston and continually, quote-unquote, getting away with whatever he gets away with, doing whatever he wants to do, then he's going to come in the NFL very much like our man Johnny Football last year, like, look, I got this, I know me, I'm not going to listen to anybody, I'm not going to do anything. Maybe that's what it is.
So if you
to me, it's the arrogance comparison.
Maybe
I think that's what it is. I think that's
a little
what it
bit.
is.
Otherwise, personality-wise, and kind of the energy they give off is vastly different.
So if you could compare Winston to anybody, who would you choose, Kate?
I went with Drew Bledsoe.
Ah.
And I did so, one, because their speed was actually not that different when you think about the combine and the results in the 40. Pocket passer. So I thought there was a lot of comparisons between the style of play, Winston and Bledsoe. And I went specifically on style of play here and the type of quarterbacks they were on the field, not trying to necessarily overlap personalities with Winston and Drew Bledsoe. But I think when you talk about a big quarterback with a strong arm, that Bledsoe's a pretty good comparison, as well as a guy that doesn't have a ton. Winston doesn't have a ton of just organic speed.
What about you, George?
See, I went with Big Ben, another big guy with a big arm, but I think that Jameis is, maybe Ben's slightly more mobile, but
I was going to say, wouldn't Winston be more mobile, you think?
No, I think Jameis may be faster than Big Ben these days, but I think both guys like to improvise in the pocket at times, and we've seen that. So that, to me, felt like the most accurate portrayal and comparison. Again, both kind of body-wise, I felt like they were similar. They're big lumbering type guys. They can shed tacklers because they're big guys. So I felt like those two guys were the closest for me.
I saved the best for last.
I kind of went the Sports Illustrated route on this, and I kind of based it on the quote-unquote arrogance that seemed to be perceived in both players, and I unfortunately went with Vince Young. And that's the scare, unfortunately, because I would hate for that to happen to and be who Jameis Winston winds up being, but there seems to be, once again, that arrogance factor, that know-it-all, that you can't tell them anything, that they're hired, they're just those people. And somehow I get that feel from Jameis that he's going to come into the league very much like Vince Young did and think that he has it all, that he knows it all, that he knows everything. And that's, to me, that's almost worse than Jay Cutler. I don't want to throw him under the bus like that, but, Vince Young, after doing what he did in college, very similar to what Jameis Winston did in college, came out and just had that attitude. You can't have that attitude going into the pros, but I see some of that in Jameis Winston.
It's got to be a balance between confidence, leadership, and also a sense of humility as well, because out of all the positions as a quarterback, you have to be the best student of the game because you're the leader.
Well, that's why I think Jameis is going to be a problem, is that the stuff that he's continually been getting away with He hasn't had to pay for anything, so I'm wondering if that humility is ever going to sit in, and if it does sit in the NFL, if it's going to be too late. I'm sorry, Kate.
Well, the one thing with Jameis is humility-wise, like he's had to face more scrutiny than Vince Young did coming in. So I think maybe he will obviously balance out to whatever his personality dictates in the league, but I think coming into it, he's probably been told a million times now, whether he follows through on it or not, how he has to act and how he has to be. And whatever arrogance that he had displayed, or sort of that sense at Florida State of always getting away with something, he's going to know coming into the NFL that that's not going to fly. And now after a couple of years, maybe, if his behavior is in line with what the NFL needs, maybe then we see more of whatever it is you're noticing come through.
Right, I hear what you're saying.
Let's go ahead and move on. Who would you compare Mariota to? George?
I would compare him to Alex Smith, but not the 49ers Alex Smith, the Kansas City Chiefs Alex Smith.
Okay.
A guy...
Good distinction.
Well, yeah, there's no question. You have to distinguish the two. Now, here's the thing. I look at them physically similar, arm strength, not the biggest arm in the world, pretty accurate guy, can throw it in the windows. Do I think he's the guy that can carry a franchise on his shoulders and be the guy that can win the game for you? I don't know if he's that guy in the NFL. I think a lot like Alex Smith, he becomes a caretaker of sorts who occasionally can make plays for you. But that's how I look at Mariota. Now, the biggest issue I have with all these quarterbacks in general, and just a quick sidebar here, is that I feel like we rush them way too fast, all of them. And I think when you look at Alex Smith, I think that may have been a part of his demise in San Francisco. We throw these guys in way too quickly, whereas just, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, Eli sat for 8 games, McNabb sat for 8 games. I mean, Phillip Rivers sat for a year, and a lot of guys sat.
But the rookie quarterbacks are getting so successful so soon now.
That's the thing, right?
Are they really though? Like, think of the last crop of guys. I mean, it's Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck for the most part that have had huge success. Yeah, you can
Kaepernick had some success,
but he's regressed a little bit.
I'd be interested to see the numbers, and we can obviously name quarterbacks.
Yeah, Matty Ice had some success early.
I think they're the outliers, is what I'm saying.
I'm saying this seems to be a trend, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think they're the outliers. I'd like to see kind of going back to developing guys, for letting them sit for a while, because it's what I mentioned earlier, when Mort said, which is you're going in from being one of the guys to being the CEO, but yet still having to be one of the guys. That's a hard transition for a young guy to be the leader of a team of men who are 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years older than you. So I think that part of the game helps. Guys like Carson Palmer sat for a year, and he was really good before the knee injury. Right. Steve McNair sat for years too, and he was obviously very good.
I agree with you, but I don't think it's going to happen. The expectations are too much.
Yeah, I think the way the NFL works now, they see something and they saw a couple of quarterbacks be good real quick. Everybody wants to go that route, so the expectations are going to be put on.
I think Mariota would be really good if he could sit for a little bit.
So real quick, Scoop, who do you think?
Mine was Joe Flacco. It's just funny to me that when they're on, they're fun to watch. You know what I'm saying? And they find a way to get it done. And I think in the right situation, he could actually be a Joe Flacco. Not always going to be every year. He's not going to be in the best quarterback conversation. He's not going to be in the Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers conversation. But he'll be right there, doing his thing, having good years, having bad years, but getting it done at a certain time with the right team.
So a 1A.
Huh?
A 1A.
That's kind of what Flacco is. He's a 1A. He's come playoff time. If his team is in the hunt, you can't count him out. And I see 5 or 6 years down the line, that's who Mariota's going to be. He's going to be that player. Like, look, if he's in, you may not have to count him out.
That's a massive compliment. What, 6 consecutive appearances in the playoffs in his first 6 seasons?
Yeah.
Flacco?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so who do you compare Amari Cooper to? Kate.
Well, I compared Mariota to Colin Kaepernick. Because pretty specific. I had such a good one. I gotta get this out to the world.
I'm sorry.
I mean, it is a pretty standard comparison in terms of specifically their skill set. I think Colin's a little bigger and stronger physically now, but Marcus possibly will get there in a few years. These are guys with speed, right? Not polished passers at this point,
right.
but and very system dependent. Although obviously Marcus Mariota is hoping to get to an NFL franchise and prove that he's a pro QB regardless of system, but you've got doubters who are saying, of course, he needs to be with Chip Kelly and the Eagles to flourish. So I think those two have a very specific skill set physically that mirrors one another.
I like that comparison. I'm doing a bad job of quarterbacking right now. So let's go back to you first. What about Amari Cooper? Who do you compare him to?
You know, this was a tough one because I think there's a lot of receivers that you could kind of pin him with. I ended up going with Marvin Harrison because I think he will be
On the field.
On the field. On the field. I know. Lived in Philly for 3 years, so I know. But he's a high volume. I think he'll be a high volume receiver. I think he's fast. He's really fast, but that's not his only skill set. I think he'll also be a guy that you can dump it off to and cut it going across the middle. So Marvin Harrison, I felt like, was I kind of was leaning toward a few other guys, but I think Marvin Harrison and the speed, but not that being the #1 asset, was a good comparison.
Cool. George?
See, I went with Marvin's teammate, Reggie Wayne. I think he's a slightly faster Reggie Wayne. I think he is dependable, can do everything on the field. I think if you look at Reggie Wayne's career, I think some people think he's a Hall of Famer. I would say he's at least a borderline Hall of Famer. I think Amari Cooper has that type of talent. I think he can do everything on the field. He can carry a passing game. We've seen him do that at the college level. Reggie Wayne, when he was coming out of college, I believe left the University of Miami as the all-time leading receiver there, which says a lot because there have been a lot of good receivers that came out of there. And I think Amari is made in that particular mold.
Scoop?
See, no disrespect to these two, but they're not going to have Peyton Manning. He's not going to have Peyton Manning as a quarterback to make him that. So
good point.
Right. So
maybe the Broncos will draft up.
There you go. There you go.
Never know what trade
But then he only had Peyton for 1 year.
Okay,
so
right.
it's done. No, I kind of went with Anquan Bolden. You know, I looked at, they kind of like the same size as far as height. He's a little bit faster. But I see, a couple of Pro Bowls. A Super Bowl in him, Rookie of the Year. I think he's probably going to get a chance to Rookie of the Year, and someone who makes big plays. To me, that's, and have a long, 11-year career, 12-year career of being relevant. Not that superstar wide receiver, but one that just has a nice, solid resume where he, at the end of the day, end of his career, is like, is he or is he not Hall of Fame worthy? But he won't have to say anything. Look, man, I've been to 5 Pro Bowls. I helped my team get I got an MVP in the Super Bowl. I was Rookie of the Year. I kind of look at it that way.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
Major League Baseball.
San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
The new college football playoff.
College football playoff national champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
Welcome back. It is the fight of the century, and we are now just 4 days away from the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight. And beyond the ring, there has been a greater discussion about Floyd Mayweather's history of domestic violence. He's been convicted 5 times over the last 14 years. And when Outside the Lines' John Barr asked Mayweather about those 5 convictions, here's what the undefeated boxing champion said.
In your case, there's been actual convictions, and no governing body has ever suspended you or sanctioned you. What message do you think that sends victims of domestic violence?
I say I want everybody to tune in May 2nd. Mayweather versus Pacquiao. This is a fight that you can't miss.
You have no desire to answer that question?
I'm blessed to be where I'm at. I have 4 beautiful children, and I'm truly blessed to be where I'm at today. And with hard work and dedication, you can be anywhere in life.
Well, look, unquestionably, you've worked hard to get to where you are, but there are a lot of people who wonder why you should be allowed to continue to box in the highest profile events when you've got the track record that you have, when in other sports there have been serious repercussions for some of these athletes.
Well, when it's all said and done, only God can judge you, but I don't want people to miss this fight. This is an unbelievable matchup. Mayweather-Pacquiao, May 2nd. Be there.
Okay, so knowing his past has put a lot of people in a difficult position as to whether or not everybody should be watching this fight. It's a conversation that continues. So we're going to ask you guys today, the question is, are you dismissing his past by watching the fight? Kate?
It's such a difficult question, right?
It is.
And I think for a media member, for myself, I think it would be claiming some sort of moral high ground to say, I'm not going to watch the fight for this reason, and to say that everybody should join me in that. I understand that people want to watch this fight for the sporting value. Now, what responsibility do I take then on myself talking about this issue? I don't think it's going to make much change for me to say, or anybody to say, don't watch the fight. That will change anything. What can we do? As somebody who gets on TV and talks about this, be educated about this issue. I think that has been the downfall to this point. none of us would get up here and have a discussion on the NBA without knowing what we were talking about. We would not come onto the air and not know the systemic issues within the NBA, why teams tank, the commissioner, everything that happens in that league, down to specific players. We would know it all, and we would need to know it all to talk about that issue. And yet we, as media members, have had people speak on this issue without being educated, without coming onto the air knowing about domestic violence and knowing about the issues that surround domestic violence. And when you're not educated, what ends up happening is that you fall back on stereotypes. And when that happens, you're propagating the wrong misinformation. And I think taking that one step forward, a lot of times you'll hide behind the idea that, well, I'm just reflecting the public's attitude because the public's going to tune into this fight. Well, I like to think that we're all trying to provide a different way of looking at things, an insight, an educated insight into a way to look at something. I don't think we're just reflecting the public back to them. You're not putting somebody on the cover of a magazine because that's cool. You also want to let people know what's cool and let people know what's right and change people's thinking. And I think that's what's important to me about talking about this issue. Not boycotting the fight and telling people to boycott the fight. I think what's important to say to people and important to say to other media members is when you get on the air to talk about this issue, study.
Right.
Know the issue.
Right.
It's not about what happens May 2nd. It's about the conversations we have every day leading up to May 2nd and the conversations we will have right after May 2nd. And some people will say this is about capitalism, that we have put a product out there and people are buying it, therefore it is justified. But what we don't realize is that it's packaged beautifully. It's in the sports world. It's not Greg Hardy sitting on a shelf and people have bought Greg Hardy. It's Greg Hardy on the Dallas Cowboys. In the NFL, this shiny package. It's not an equivalent, right? Analogy I use, it's like buying a packet of Skittles. You may not like one of them, but you like the package. So these things are all not equivalent, and this is what this fight is about. It's in the world of the sports arena, which is marketed and packaged beautifully, so you can't separate that out, and you can't claim the moral high ground and tell people don't watch this fight. But when we get on TV and we talk about it, we darn sure better know what we're talking about.
Well said, Kate. And I think when it comes to educating ourselves, all of us are in the process of learning about this, especially after the Ray Rice incident regarding domestic violence. George, what do you think?
I would agree with Kate. I would say that, first of all, in the media, you kind of have to compartmentalize this stuff. I think that you have to say to yourself, okay, I have a job to do, and it's to cover the fight or cover this game or whatever, and that's just the reality of the world that we live in. Now, as a human being, as people, no one is condoning, I don't believe, what transpired with Floyd Mayweather's past. At least I don't think so. But what I'm saying is this, is if it can be both. You can not condone what he did and also at the same time try to compartmentalize it and say, okay, I'm watching it for the sporting value of it. Same as if you'd watch an entertainer, a singer, a movie star in a movie or at a concert or buying their albums on iTunes or whatever because they've had transgressions off the stage or whatnot. To me, it all kind of falls into the same category.
Exactly.
Just because you're watching the fight or you're watching the NFL or you're watching a concert or a movie doesn't mean that you condone the actions. It can be both. And I think that sometimes gets lost in this world we live in where, no offense, but I like to call it the hot tickety-take society, where everyone has to stand on one side or the other. No, it could be both. There can be some common ground in the middle here.
It is a really tough position because I think for some people, including myself and my colleague Sarah Spain and I had this conversation, if we do buy the $89 or $99, it's going into that pot in which Mayweather is going to get, whatever, 180 million of it, and Mayweather will get 120 million of it. And is it up to all of us, whether it's fans or parts of the media, to actually take a stand? It's not an easy, this is not an easy answer.
I didn't go into...
No, I was just going to say this real quick. As a member of the media, I think the first thing we're supposed to not do is make ourselves part of the story, right? So I think that if you take that moral high ground and it almost comes across as grandstanding, I think, even though it may be what you believe.
Right, but if you have to have a position and you use your position to make a position, I get that also. But I wrestle with what he's saying, is looking at the whole landscape of entertainment. You know, do you start picking and choosing where you want to take a stand? So you're going to take a stand against boxing because, or against this particular fight because you have an issue with domestic violence. Okay, but you still listen to music with artists who still happen to beat up their other people. You still go to movies where, you know, the director may have had, you know, situations. We can't be picking and choosing. We need to be consistent across the line, and that's what I wrestle with. You know, and I don't want to be a hypocrite by saying, okay, I'm not going to watch or support Floyd Mayweather, but I'm going to listen to whoever. You know what I'm saying? I can't. That's that hazy shade that we all fall into. We have to make a decision. Now, in that particular case, I think it's a little bit different, especially when you're dealing with music, as opposed to this, because we can't act like there's nobody else that's involved in this. You know, if you don't particularly buy somebody's album, that's that artist maybe, or maybe the producer or whoever that is, or that group, right? There's somebody else involved in this. There is Manny-Pacquiao. So by watching the fight, you're also maybe turning your back on him. Does he deserve this? All the money, maybe 60% of the money is going to Floyd Mayweather if you pay for the fight, but 40% is still going to Manny-Pacquiao. So what are you doing there? What are you blaming him for? So I think it's a very slippery slope, but I don't think we're dismissing Floyd from his activities by not just media, but even as fans investing in the fight. My thing is that if you don't want to root for Floyd Mayweather, don't root for him. You can still engage in the fight. I was a big Floyd fan, but a couple of years ago, he lost me. I'm going to watch the fight, but I'm not rooting for him to win. You know what I'm saying? That's the way you internally handle it, because I have nothing against Manny Pacquiao, and I don't want him to be a victim of somebody else's, you know, actions, because that's collateral damage, and that's not fair. One, is not fair to the sport of boxing. True, and then secondly, it's not fair to the other person that's in the ring.
Yeah, just add one thing. I have trouble with saying don't watch the fight. It's so hollow. It's not going to cause action, right? It's not going to change how we talk about domestic violence. It's the same when people said, like, well, don't watch football anymore. It's such a hollow request, because the fact is people aren't just going to jump all the way there. You have to make the incremental steps along the way. So instead of just telling people don't buy the fight and you shouldn't care about the fight, and if you do, you're a bad person, why not start here at square one and just speak in more intelligent ways about it when given the opportunity? Address these things in a small manner so that maybe 20 years from now, it's not all of a sudden we have this fight and 1 week before everybody seems to be recognizing his issues, but we will have had this discussion all along.
Right. Yeah. When he's had multiple fights since the issues with him outside the ring had happened already.
Right, and I'm not protecting Floyd, but we also have to take into consideration the difference between the NFL maybe is that at least he did go to jail for this.
Yes.
You know, there was a punishment paid. He paid some dues for this. Now, boxing doesn't have a governing body to do anything about it, but at least he paid some dues. With the NFL, I'm not disagreeing with you. A lot of the people that committed this, they weren't charged with anything. So that may be where, you know, your stand takes a chance, takes a different stance on this. And, like, look, at least Floyd, if you want to watch the fight, you can, because you can say, at least I'm not what he stands for, but at least he did pay a punishment.
You can say justice was served in the specific sense, but then you can have a larger question about whether our social justice system actually is working.
And also, he never faced any sort of consequences from the boxing commission and officials. He was never suspended. And that 90-day sentence that he received back in 2011, that actually got pushed back so he could go and move forward with
only served two-thirds of it.
Exactly. First Take is indeed on the road in Las Vegas for Fight Week. Carrie, Skip, and Stephen A. will all be at the MGM Grand Pool tomorrow through Friday. Not a bad job, right? Just hanging out by the pool. Special guests will include 50 Cent and Jamie Foxx. Doors open at 5:30 a.m. That would be local time. The show starts at 7 a.m. local. So please come on out and you can watch them in person. Watch First Take on the road in Vegas. Okay, so we are 4 days away from the fight, and it looks like just about everybody has made their picks on the board except for us. And we don't have any heads since we're kind of the B team. So we tried to have the heads made this morning. But listen, a computer can only do so much. So we're just going to make our picks here.
Right.
Who are you guys going with? George?
See, I kind of wrestled with this a little bit because I think Floyd is the better boxer at this stage. But then I started listening to some of the guys that have fought against them, common opponent types like Oscar De La Hoya felt really strongly about Manny, and I know Miguel Cotto felt that Manny had an edge. And then I heard guys like Roy Jones feel like Manny could have an edge, and even Mike Tyson felt that Manny could be the guy to win this fight. So I'm thinking, all right, if those guys feel that strongly about it, I would figure that I feel confident about Manny. I would have felt more confident a few years ago, and then it struck me. I don't ever dream about sports working in this business.
I was wondering if you were going to bring this
But
up.
I actually had it was a dream. I don't know what, I was at the fight, which I'm not going to be at. I was at the fight, and I'm watching it, and Manny knocked him out in my dream, which is ridiculous and crazy to be making a pick based off a dream.
Have you had premonitions before?
I don't know.
Not about
See, she
sports.
didn't call it a dream.
I don't really dream about
Premonition.
sports all that much,
But
so I don't.
there's a difference between a dream and a premonition. Was it a premonition or was it a dream?
No, it was a dream.
But a dream can be a premonition.
Only if you put money on it. What you gonna do?
Next.
I ain't putting money on it. That's for damn sure. I ain't putting money on it. So, between all the guys, the common opponents, and some of the other guys that have fought those type of big fights in the past, I'm leaning towards Manny in this one.
Okay, so you're going to do the copycat thing and base it off of your dream. Cool. Scoop, I'm just
In a nutshell, that's what.
In a nutshell, but basically the
I had a
determining
dream.
factor was the dream. Not just because De La Hoya and Mike Tyson and Roy Jones said it, but, that tipped the scales as we have in the dream.
Oh, man. Scoop, what do you
Well,
think?
in my dream, in all honesty, I think Floyd's gonna pull out the fight. I've always thought Floyd's gonna pull out the fight. To me, he's the best, maybe the second best. I give Pernell Whitaker credit to me as being the best defensive fighter I've ever
Sweet
seen.
Pete.
But he's the best defensive and counterpuncher we've probably of this era, and he doesn't lose fights. He may not win every fight, but Floyd just doesn't lose fights. And, my thing is that, if he gets past the first couple of rounds, which he will, he'll become surgical. And that's what Floyd does. Floyd becomes surgical in the ring. He's one of the smartest fighters that's ever been in the ring. I know Manny has a lot going on inside, but I just think with that defense and his ability to counterpunch, at the end of the day, that's going to reign supreme over Manny in the ring.
Kate, what do you think?
Well, I'm going with Manny, and a lot of that
Did you have a dream,
You have a dream too?
I did.
Yeah.
I had a dream. I'm going with them. We've heard at length on this network about the X's and O's of this fight and the pros and cons of each fighter. I'm going with Manny because I like him better, frankly. He's the underdog, right? I grew up on John Starks and New York Knicks. He's like that to me. So I don't have a tactical, breakdown of how he's going to do it like Oscar De La Hoya would offer us. And I didn't have a dream, which showed me what was going to happen. But I'm going to be rooting for him, and I think he's going to pull it out.
Let me ask you guys a question. Because Floyd is a great businessman. That we can't take away from him.
Yeah.
You're not about to go here, are you?
Wouldn't it be in his best interest to lose this fight?
Wow, no.
And then have 3?
Boxing.
I'm just saying, it's not like we haven't seen crazy outcomes before in boxing.
No.
One thing, a situation where you've been like,
Because
what just happened?
they're already getting their money. They're already getting
The
their
deal
money.
to him with him already not having anything but a 0 in that loss column would be a draw.
Oh, there you go.
Now, if you're losing, then you get a draw.
I'm just thinking of conspiracy
You guys
theories.
don't work for boxing.
Conspiracy theories.
And how many?
Come on, boxing's done that to itself, though.
Right,
Let's
no, I
be
know,
honest.
now you're helping.
Yeah.
And he has two more fights on
We're
his
aiding and
contract with
abetting.
Showtime.
Yeah.
Why not make those? Hey, there it is.
3 fights.
3 fights.
Make it a trilogy.
Just one,
But
and then the rematch.
From the business
Right.
side,
You draw, then the next person wins, and then there's a rematch.
Then a rematch. That's how you do it.
Also,
That's actually pretty
Ronda
smart.
It is.
Rousey picked Manny, and she hasn't lost either. So, she probably with UFC would need to throw a fight to keep her, ego up high and her
I feel you.
paycheck. And I like when I pick something that Ronda Rousey has also picked. So,
Okay, I'm gonna jump on that bandwagon.
No,
I'm gonna go with
you
Manny.
can't get out of this.
No, I'm going to.
We're women over there picking Pacquiao.
Oh,
right at the end of the day.
Yeah, I guess so. No, I'm going to go with Manny Pacquiao just because, you know what, he's got the power. I know he doesn't have the power that he did several years ago, but you know what, Floyd Mayweather doesn't have the defensive capabilities nor the speed that he used to. This fight should have happened 5 years ago. I'm going to go with Manny, and honestly, my pick is being influenced by who I'm sort of rooting for just because of the path of Mayweather. So
I like your conspiracy there. I like the draw. I do. I may be swung. I still take Manny. I'll put it on the record. But I wouldn't put it past boxing.
Yeah,
there's a draw.
Yeah, because boxing needs
Yeah.
boxing can use the attention that boxing is getting from this fight.
That's a great idea.
They could use this for a couple more years to get things rolling back up again. So it'll be smart. And I'm not mad.
They need a trilogy.
They need a trilogy. They need a
maybe
trilogy.
boxing should hire you as their marketing.
Because look,
guy.
Vladimir Klitschko is the heavyweight champion of the
He
world.
just fought in Madison Square Garden and no one.
It's on HBO. You can't even get a pay-per-view fight with Vladimir Klitschko. So boxing needs this one to go
That is
for a
really
couple
smart
fights.
because if you think about it, after this fight, it's basically closing the chapter on boxing. Unless they have a rematch. But after that, this is it.
Yeah, and what's
UFC
the next fight?
Nothing.
Right.
The UFC is taking over.
Yeah, here's the question, just real quick. I know we got to go. Do you think the will that Floyd has not to lose is going to play a role in this? Like he really, Manny gains nothing from this, basically. But Floyd can lose everything with a loss. Manny losing, he's
already got a couple.
It doesn't mean anything. It just, I beat Floyd Mayweather. Everything is riding on Floyd. Do you think that plays a role in this fight? Like, he has everything to lose, and he's going to bring that to the ring.
No, because he's done it before, 47 times before.
But not against Manny, though.
True.
It was an interesting day. I got to Baltimore about 2 o'clock, and things were calm at 2 o'clock. I went over to the ballpark, and as the day unfolded, we started to see reports on the monitors around the ballpark. It's important to remember with a regular season game that the decision as to whether or not it's played rests fundamentally with the home team. As the situation worsened in the later afternoon, I was down in the Orioles clubhouse with Buck Showalter, Dan Duquette. I spoke by phone to Luis Angelos and then to Peter and got various reports on the situation. And frankly, as it developed, it was not a hard decision to make.
So that was Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred addressing the decision to postpone last night's White Sox game against the Orioles this morning on Mike and Mike. The cancellation was in reaction to the violence and riots outside Camden Yards. Rioters have looted stores and thrown rocks and bricks at Baltimore police in the wake of Freddie Gray's mysterious spinal injury, who died in police custody. It's another situation where sports and real life collide. Now, here's what Knicks star Carmelo Anthony had to say about this. He grew up in Baltimore. He posted this to his Instagram account. "We all want justice, and our city will get the answers we are looking for. My deepest sympathy goes out to the Gray family. To see my city in a state of emergency is just shocking. We need to protect our city, not destroy it. What happens when we get the answers that we want and the media attention is not there anymore? We go back to being the same old Baltimore City again." So guys, the question we ask right now, what responsibility do athletes have in social situations? Scoop, I want to go to you.
I don't know if they have responsibility. You just like for them to show one. In this particular situation, I appreciate what Carmelo did, and to me, that's what athletes, when you're dealing with a situation that you are connected to, and he happens to be connected to Baltimore, use your position as an athlete that is certainly revered to make some type of statement, to make a position, and take a position. He set a great example, I'll put it that way. But I don't want to sit out here and say they should have that responsibility to do it. I just wish that they do. They shouldn't have to be forced to do this by their organization, by a league, by anybody. They should look, especially as black men, they should look at what's going on. And in this particular case, Baltimore, if there's a connection there, then you should speak out and say something. Use your resources. Use social media. If you're a team, if you're the Baltimore Orioles, take some of your players and make a public service announcement. If you're the Baltimore Ravens, do the same thing. Use radio PSAs. Get on this show. At some point, use your resources to at least say something about the situation, to either make change, make calm, make the decision, make it better, give a secondary thought, something. And once again, as a black athlete, I think we, in this particular case, harbor a greater responsibility to do something. So, it would be nice to see a Delman Young, or Adam Jones, or a Wesley Wright of the Baltimore, Orioles, as black men come out in this particular situation, and this is happening in their city. Say something. Just you do the exact same thing Carmelo did.
Obviously a really sad situation all around with what's transpiring in Baltimore, but I do applaud Carmelo Anthony, because I think it takes some courage to get yourself out there on these social issues for athletes. I think there's a lot that is involved here. I mean, there's the old adage, right, with Michael Jordan, that he said Republicans buy sneakers too, and he took a lot of criticism for that. We've seen athletes do this before. LeBron James and the Miami Heat a couple years ago when Trayvon Martin and that situation happened. So I agree with you. I don't think it's necessary. I also have generally subscribed to the theory that athletes are not role models and they shouldn't have to be. But if you do feel in your heart that there is a specific cause that you want to take up for, and in this case, obviously, Baltimore is very close to Carmelo Anthony, having grown up there, I think you absolutely should feel like you should get yourself involved. If it's a real issue that affects you personally. And I think that, as you pointed out, I think from an ethnicity standpoint, it should attract black men because of what's transpiring here. And I would say the same if it was a Hispanic, contingent or whatever was going on there. So I would say this, that I applaud Carmelo Anthony for his stance, and hopefully that people heed his advice in that situation.
Well, my thing is that don't have a conversation amongst yourself as athletes and not take it anywhere else.
Sure.
You know, don't be in the clubhouse saying, speaking, man, this is sad. Look what's going on in Baltimore, and don't have that conversation internally and not have it externally to the people that need to hear it.
Just as long as they are educated about it and are familiar with it in terms of if they do come out and say something, though. Kate, what do you think?
Of course, sports has always reflected society, and they've run parallel in a lot of ways over the last 100 years. And I think when I look back on it, one thing that I think has changed over the last couple years has been athletes' willingness to step forward on social issues. I think we saw it with individual sport athletes a long time ago, generations ago with Muhammad Ali.
Jim Brown.
Yeah, the 72 Mexico City.
Right. Yeah, John Carlos. Yeah.
So I think now we're seeing that with NBA players specifically, as they see that they have a huge platform in a way maybe they didn't know they had in the 80s or 90s, and team sport athletes maybe before being under like a team umbrella and an ownership umbrella and not being sure what they were allowed to say, they're kind of breaking out of that. And you spoke earlier of compartmentalizing, and it felt like sports used to be athletes are athletes,
right,
and that's it. And then over here are these social issues. And occasionally they would cross, but not that frequently. Well, I think that box over here is shrinking a little bit. Athletes are athletes on the night that they play the game, but we're seeing a lot more that when they're away from the game and like on their off days, like you mentioned in the Miami Heat with Trayvon Martin, and a number of athletes over the last couple of years making very poignant statements about that. I think they're realizing that they need to be athletes on the night that they are competing, but on any other time, they are citizens of this country.
Correct.
And have a platform, and I think they're embracing that. I think a lot of these guys have felt like they didn't have a voice for a long time, and they want to have a voice. They don't want to just be defined as he shoots jumpers. They want people to know that they think about these important issues, they have insight to offer, and they have a platform that could inspire. And I'm not saying they're absolutely need to and they have a responsibility for it, but they do have an opportunity and a platform if they choose to embrace it.
That's why I think it takes some courage to do this type of stuff, whether it's LeBron and the Heat back then or Carmelo in this situation, because you're going to have people in your camp that are going to tell you, I don't know if you should delve into that because it may not help you in any way, and they're thinking about financial ramifications and this and that. But I'm with you. At some point you have to be, right, your brand. At some point you have to be true to yourself. And Carmelo is being true to himself, and that's why he should be applauded.
And we've morphed in this country from a brand to your brand being who you are. And that's selling. People knowing who you are and being able to identify certain beliefs and viewpoints with you, as opposed to you just being a sneaker shoe seller.
I think that's a result of athletes are now celebrities, and with more money and a bigger platform, social media, now their brand and their personality has given them a bigger platform. So to me, I subscribe to the notion that, listen, you already have a platform, you have the opportunity, so why not go ahead and make a statement if it means making the world a better place? But boy, the 1 seed in the East is getting a run for their money, aren't they? With the Brooklyn Nets last night, the Atlanta Hawks lost in overtime, 120 to 115. The series is now tied at 2 games apiece. Kyle Korver, the league's leading three-point shooter, missed 3 straight from behind the arc in the final seconds of the game. The Hawks have gone 9-10 over their last 19 games. So the question we ask, are the Hawks getting exposed? Kate?
The way I see the Hawks is that they're a linked team, right? They're almost like Christmas lights. One goes out, the whole thing goes out.
That's a great analogy.
I see them a lot in that way. I see them sort of, if they're falling apart a little bit in one area, the whole thing becomes untangled. That concerns me about them, but you could have said the same thing about the Spurs last year. Just the way the flow in which they play, when it's working, it's amazing. Yeah. And when it's not, it's concerning. Or you actually think to yourself, very easily this could stop working because of how tightly wound it seems to be. And I think that way about the Hawks. I'm not concerned because I think Korver going 4 for 13 like he did last time, missing all those shots at the end, is not something we're going to keep seeing. Although I was slightly concerned about them in the last 50 seconds, the Hawks. What they were doing was confusing. Korver took what he thought was a 3, fading away in the corner with his toe on the line, the absolute worst shot you could get. Yep. And they seem to just be chasing this really bad three-pointer. That was concerning to me, that they need to get those end-of-game situations a little tighter.
See, I'm not concerned at all, actually. When I look at that game, I agree with you. Korver will start hitting shots. They're going to start hitting shots, period. And yesterday they shot 30%, Atlanta, on uncontested shots. I mean, that's a ridiculous number. Like, that's not going to happen again. And you combine that with the fact that Darren Williams went for 35. it's been a long time since he's had that kind of game with some consistency to it. So I look at that one. I feel like it's just an anomaly. So I'm okay with the Atlanta Hawks moving forward. The only concern I have is Millsap. He's had some moments where he's looked good, but I don't know how consistent he can be with that shoulder injury. How much is that playing a factor? They're going to hit shots. I think that they work the ball around enough where they're going to find the open man. They're going to continue to get open looks, and they're not going to shoot 30% with those uncontested jumpers.
Scoop is just waiting to pounce on this. Go ahead.
Neither one of them answered your question. They got real political and John Kerry on you. Talked about their concerns.
They're not getting exposed.
Yes, they are getting exposed.
No.
Maybe not for this particular series, but for down the road. They're going to have to face Washington. This is something Washington likes to see, a team that cannot function with a sense of urgency. Washington has nothing but edge. They're going to bring that and psychologically get into the Atlanta Hawks because they're seeing what they can be exposed to right now. And even after that, if it's the Bulls, the Bucks, or the Cavaliers, they're all watching Atlanta because there's no one seed. Yes, they're being exposed. Maybe not for this series, but down the line, yes.
But they're missing uncontested shots. It's not like the defense is doing something where you can say, Atlanta is getting pulled up. Yeah, but they're uncontested shots is not a strategy that a defense can employ.
Yeah. But should anyone really be surprised? Because, they did get the 1 seed, a 60-win season, but everybody was like, oh, they're so cute. The Atlanta Hawks, they're in. Did everybody?
Yeah, they'll be fine. When they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, they won't be so cute anymore.
No, they're exposed.
Okay, we'll see.
I like the Christmas lights analogy. That's how I feel.
That is a good point, though.
When I'm not with you guys, though, that's how I feel. I feel like my entire system shuts down.
But there's just something about them when they're flowing, you get it. And then as they start to pull apart, you're really, really concerned. But they've been lit up, if we're going to stick with the Christmas.
It's been fun. Kate, Scoop, George, Prem, Carrie, Skip, and Stephen A. will be in Vegas tomorrow.